Welcome to Global Tax Talks. I'm Will Morris, and we're filming here at PwC's Africa Tax Policy and Business Symposium in Mombasa, Kenya, where I'm delighted to be joined by Teresa Owusu-Adjei, PwC's Global TLS Clients and Markets Leader, and also by Titus Mukora, a partner in PwC Kenya and transfer pricing expert. Teresa, welcome back, and
Thank
Titus,
you.
welcome. Good, great to have both of you. Okay, so let's launch straight into this. Teresa, a question for you. So talk to us about the status of Pillar 2 in Africa. Kenya, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Mauritius have all adopted this, and Nigeria has effectively adopted a domestic minimum top-up tax. So what's the future of Pillar 2 in Africa, and what have you learned from the participants at the symposium over the past couple of days?
So, a couple of different things. First of all, the participants are worried about, understandably, about what is the future of Pillar 2, given the current uncertainty with the US. And so the conversations we've had have been about, from a strategic perspective, are the African countries better off actually continuing to implement Pillar 2, or does it not matter because of what's happening in the US? And then on top of that, there are a lot of special economic zones and incentives. Does the money that is saved here in the continent just get paid elsewhere? So I do think that we're at a bit of a stage where we're not quite sure if anyone else is going to follow. There's very much a watch this space.
Right.
And then from a more practical perspective, we all know that even if the countries here don't implement Pillar 2, well, there are 55 countries that have implemented it.
Yep.
So if they are subsidiaries of one of those companies that has been implemented, what people are really focused on is that they know that it's going to be a sort of monstrous, I think is the word you use.
I think it was. Yes.
Yeah, monstrous compliance obligation. And I think people are just beginning to get their heads around it. But time is running out because, most of those filings are due in less than a year.
Right. Yeah, it's a big issue. I mean, it was interesting to hear the governments, not just taxpayers, but the governments talk about this incentives point as well, because as you say, with SEZs and various other incentives, it's a big, big issue.
Yeah, and it's a real balancing out. What is actually the best for them? Is it to implement Pillar 2, or is it to actually focus on their own domestic regimes to kind of revenue raise as well?
So Titus, let me turn to you with another of the big issues of the day. So tell us about the implication of the actions that President Trump has been taking, the executive orders, obviously the tariffs, and also the fact that the Africa Growth Opportunity Act has just lapsed. What does all of this mean? And, sort of what is the impact of that on Africa, a series of countries, I just hasten to add, not a continent. What is that? What is the effect on Africa with its trade with the US?
Yeah. So trade with the US, trade between the African continent and the US is not very substantial. However, there are certain sectors and pockets of sectors where there has been very good growth, and particularly the textile subsector. And in that area, for example, in Kenya, it employs 65,000 people. And I think the textile companies have been very clear that if the AGOA is not renewed, it will put a lot of pressure on those companies to relocate their operations. So we understand that there could be, there is in works a 1-year extension at the least. But I think also one of the key messages from this conference has been around predictability and certainty. And so I think as much as there's going to be a 1-year extension, I think it would be really important to really concretize what is the long-term plan so as to allow more investment around the textile subsector. In terms of the tariffs, I think those also are, again, as I say, it's not very substantial trade between the US and Africa. But certain countries, especially in the southern region, like South Africa and Lesotho, have been hit with very significant tariffs. And those are also going to have a long-term impact on trade and between South Africa and the US, and also between countries like Lesotho and the US. And particularly in terms of, if you look at Lesotho, again, it's really particularly in terms of jobs that in the textile subsector, once again. Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's really helpful. Okay, so a question for both of you, maybe Teresa first and then Titus. So tell us about the tension, and again, we've been hearing about this over the past couple of days. Tell us about the tension between where the UN may be going, where the OECD is going, international tax rules, and the opportunities and the challenges for Africa. And I just want to put on top of that one thing, which has been probably the biggest theme of the whole conference, which is we need growth-friendly tax policies.
Yeah. Okay. So big one. I think what's really come across to me is that when you're sort of sat in the room listening to the participants, that the African countries want a stronger voice at the OECD table. They don't currently have it. And if they go individually, they're really not going to get it.
Yep.
I think if they try and do something alternative, which is through the UN framework, you then end up with parallel rules. And then Titus's point about uncertainty, that doesn't help anybody at all. So possibly impacts investment in Africa, in the first place. So I think everybody's really cognizant of that they want a body that has a stronger voice, but nobody needs parallel euros as well. And then that comes to your point about the growth-friendly measures. I think what really struck me was how consistent speaker after speaker was about it, but also being really targeted about making sure that new tax laws that come in are maybe more coordinated across the region. So if people are coming up with invoicing VAT in one country and there's a copy and paste, why copy, paste, and amend? To the methodology, and maybe just copy and paste it so that people operating in the region have certainty and maybe efficiency on that. That in itself would be a really easy business-friendly thing to do.
So, Titus, in this age of uncertainty.
Yeah. And I think maybe just, I think an often ignored aspect of having parallel systems is, and what came out of these conferences, the complexity that this creates. The countries, the revenue authorities are not very well structured to deal with a lot of complexity. And I think that if you have two parallel systems, I think it will really create a lot of compliance burdens on companies. It will create significant compliance issues for companies and for the countries. And there'll be a need to capacity build, again, the revenue authorities around implementation. And then also, finally, it could result in some sort of penalties from the developed countries or the developing countries for implementing certain taxes that are probably seen as attacking the other country. So we don't want to be in that kind of position with the high compliance burdens, with counter penalties being imposed. I think that's going to really create. So again, just to reiterate what Teresa is saying, I think we need to pull back and still have some sort of consensus and do an approach that results in consensus in the international tax arena.
So I'm going to end on an optimistic note, which I don't often do. But one of the things that has struck me is, in a number of the major African countries, Kenya, obviously where we are, but Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, a number of others, this increasing awareness of the need to think about tax policy, which is in part brought about by, as you say, the lack of success of the OECD in a sense, may hold at the same time the key to improving the situation across Africa, because there is this awareness now, and it's
begin to think more about, well, how can we do this together? We can't shouldn't rely on other people. What can we do for ourselves now? And that I found a really positive.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Teresa, thanks so much. Titus, thank you very much as well. And thank you for joining us. You come back next time, said you are Global Tax Ready.